A Cube. Here we will discuss about the program that is related to our preparation strategy for NIS, and thereafter we can see some of the major important and other issues like history. So before coming into our course curriculum, look, this post IAS, it is a British heritage, or in fact India, all the things that is there, entirely it is a British heritage. The politico-administrative unification of India was carried out by the British, and the legacy that is derived in 190 years of the colonial rule, and that legacy was carried forward in independent India also. So you can see, if I try to give some historical background of this post. So way back in 1793, you might have heard the name of Lord Cornwallis. He was the Governor General of East India Company, and he is called Father of Indian Civil Services. He created the post of district collector and district judge. Collector, the post of collector. Basically, this post was designed for revenue collection. Many addition was made in this post in due course of time. And you'll be surprised that the collector having that time the salary around 1500 rupees per month. If you calculate with the time of inflation, it will go in million. So therefore, highly paid officer. And at the same time, you can see there was an inbuilt thing that is called commission. 1% commission was paid to this collector for all the revenue collection made by district collector. So 1% commission was also given to him. So this is the way that this post was basically designed. And Cornwallis, I told you that he is the father of Indian civil services. So Cornwallis had a declared policy that higher posts should be reserved for the Europeans and the lower post for the Indians. This is what the design was made by Cornwallis. So in due course of time, there was no proper method of appointment was designed. The court of directors was recommending the appointment in India, and then white people job was generally considered it is. But way back, again moving 1853, this is the time when examination system was introduced. Examination system was introduced for appointment of this post, and this post had went under the many fundamental changes. So examination system was introduced, and examination to be held in London. Indians were also permitted to appear in examination. And initially you can see none of the Indians were getting in the list of finally selected candidate. None of the Indians were getting in the list of final selection of the candidates. So examination to be held in London. But Indians, when they got the target, day and night there was with inbuilt hard labor, hard appreciation. So therefore, examination was to be held in London. You can see the first Indian who hit the jackpot of becoming an ICS officer, that is called Imperial Civil Services or Indian Civil Services. So first Indian who hit the jackpot, it was during the British India, and his name was Satyendra Nath Tagore. So after Satyendra Nath Tagore, many Indians were trying to, inspired by the Satyendra Nath Tagore, to appear in elite services. So when large number of Indians are going to enter in these elite services, it was not good for the health of British colonial system, because the British colonial system entirely based on the mechanism derived by post of ICS. It was backbone of the British colonialism. So large number of Indians will enter in this examination system. I told you that's not good for the health of British colonial system, British rule in India. Therefore, the British government tried to discourage Indians by reducing the age limit, and the maximum age limit at that time was 21, which were reduced to 19. Massive protest from the Indian side. It was great discontentment was expressed. So finally British moved back to 21, but there was a undeclared policy that Indians should not get a very strategic appointment related to importantly with the British policies of land revenue and others. So Indians started getting into the services. I will give you one example, the Subhash Chandra Bose. Subhash Chandra Bose, he got 4th rank in ICS. 4th rank. And he was highest scorer in English language in the history of examination. You can understand, defeating all British men, he was the highest scorer in English language in the history of examination. So you can understand that how beautifully he cultivated himself, and the pride of India was reflected in England in the list of the selected candidate. So 1919 he qualified in ICS, and then he was about to go to training, and then he got in touch with Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Inspired by the high grade of nationalism, he resigned from the services in 1920, and thereafter he jumped in national movement. And rest is the history, that how he managed himself to be the iconic of leading the Indian national movement, whether within India or he went to Japan to lead the Azad Hind Fauj, Indian National Army. So we will see in detail in the history. But anyway, this post of ICS, I told you that was the backbone of the British colonial system. Ultimately, in independent India, if everything was copied from the British system, then post of ICS, and it was renamed as IAS. So this post is a backbone of the modern Indian governance. Obviously, the reality is that the diversity of the power and the responsibility at the same time, the categorized responsiveness with this post is a very important factor. So I just wanted to convey you that how importantly you are dealing with when you are trying to prepare for this post. There is absolute mental backup required, mental backup required, and the consistent effort needed. Look, what I can assess from my all entire experiences, that whenever you joined any coaching institute, let us understand this thing through the graph. Whenever you joined any coaching institute, your initial build-up is very strong. Fine. And whatever the wage you got encouraged to join these services, but initial build-up is very strong. You are very disciplined. You are basically followed with the time. But finally, I can see that look at the graph of your time and performance in initial days of any coaching that you joined. This is performance, and this is time. look at the graph of performance of time. This is my entire assessment that I wanted to express you with this graph. And it is a straight line, straight line. Admirable performance within first 2-3 months of the coaching. Okay. But when you got a massive workload in the sense that many subjects opened and load of the current affairs, now you have started dealing with the questions. So what I feel, succumb to that workload, 90% of the students, they normally lose the rhythm of preparation. And now their performance had become a very straight line. A straight line. Because they lose the performance and because they succumb to the workload. Now they become the part of the crowd in coaching. This is a state of flux. This is a state of flux. This is a state of hibernation. 90% students in any classroom come under this high grade of the pressure, and therefore they lose the rhythm of preparation in examination. This is what is called a state of flux. Look, a good coaching institute or good coach, that should not be judged on the basis of what exactly, how beautifully there is a delivery system in the class. But at the same time, you must understand one thing, that how much interestingly the subject was presented before you. Because it is ultimately the interest, and that is a responsibility of your coach, which was delivered in the class. And then finally, when you got the subject very interesting, you go on exploring the depth of the subject. And thereby, all the analytical questions that is considered as tough to anyone would be handled very easier for you. You can handle this question very easy. And therefore, what is important? So, joining coaching institute have only one criteria, that is along with the delivery system that you observe, which is a very common. The interesting presentation is very important. If you keep inside the subject, the 2 hours if you listen in the class, that is enough for your preparation. Because I told you, it's not about knowledge, but basically it is the interest that you are pursuing with. And interest will make the task any difficulties at the point of the very easier. And you can cross the mountains. Suppose if I will tell you that you have to do some social service and you have to clear the garbage inside the road, and that is your responsibility. After 2-3 efforts you will take a bucket, you become tired. And suppose if I will tell you that there is a cases of gold buried inside and you have to dig the earth, you keep on digging the whole thing the whole day to find the gold. So what is the difficulties? Difficulties in the approach of getting the things. And that is what you have to understand. Secondly, many students keep on trying and keep on saying to me that we dominated by the negative thoughts. I would preferably wanted to convey you that there is no thought called negative thought or the positive thought. In your mind, there is no subtraction, there is no division. It's only addition or multiplication. The way that you follow that there should not come negative thought, numbers of the negative thought will dominate your mind. So try to look very normal, it's easier, and you have to make the situation in and around very calm in order to get the things with the best expression. Fine. So therefore, don't go other than the things that is not required in your preparation. Any kind of the yogic thing that's going to help you in preparation is almost a secondary fact. Only thing is that you must have a very good intensity and the focused approach as per your examination point of view. What next I found among most of the students, they don't carry syllabus and the last 10 years question paper, Not carrying the syllabus, whether it is required or not, or that's hardly matter, but there should be a syllabus and the question paper in your bag. It's a basic foundation of anything before going to prepare, because it will always guide you what is the length and breadth you have to keep in focus. Those who are not carrying the syllabus and the question paper along with, they are simply swimming in an ocean without any GPS system. So that is what you have to do first. You have to keep this thing in record always throughout the preparation. Always keep on looking towards the syllabus, what we have covered, what we have to cover. According to syllabus, what type of questions being asked. If you try to make such analysis in your mind, which you can do yourself, this is the focused approach, what I am talking about. So go by the copybook style. These are the things you have to do, and these are things you don't have to do. And this is the way that you can prepare yourself for examination. This is a basic, this is a schooling before going to appear in this examination. Fine. So coming back to, we have a planned session that each and every expert will give you the glimpse of the subject, and then finally you will got to know that what is going to be done and how beautifully anyone can present the things before you, so that it will become easier for you to carry so many subjects together. So let us talk. Say, India, it was a golden bird. I'm not saying that. It's not a nostalgic expression that we said India is a golden bird. Most of the Greek literature are anonymous, focusing the point that India is a golden bird. And many Greek literature had a same expression to say this. In ancient times, you can see India was the largest exporter of consumer goods. And bullions was flowing inside this country. This was the trading pattern that India followed. Largest exporter of consumer goods, and bullions was flowing in this country. And that make this land as a golden bird. During the time of Mughal also, after the advent of Islam, you will find the trading pattern almost remained the same. Particularly when during the time of Mughals, the trade pattern was integrated with the Europeans. The magnitude of the export and what you can say consumer items, it had increased significantly, and again there was a import of the bullions, that is gold and silver. So in medieval India also, the magnitude of the golden bird was maintained, and we dominated the trading affairs of the world. If dominance of economy, dominance of the entire geography and on the world map that you can see. But when Europeans came to India, particularly out of the many Europeans, we can say English. So advent of English, it marked a new change in the dimension of trade. English East India Company, only ways that English East India Company did in India, the entire policy frame was done in such a way that the trade of balance got reversed. So when trade of balance got reversed, you can see that India turned out to be importer of consumer goods from England. Importer of consumer goods from England. Okay, and then after bullions started flying out of this country. And after continuous exploitation, this golden bird had turned out to be bird. This golden bird, which turned out to be simply bird. We are birds. Birds. So this phenomena, which transformed this golden bird into bird, this generally be referred as a British colonialism. This is called British colonialism. This is called British colonialism. So, while studying this colonial period, we have to look some of the important facets that how British transformed into colonial power. Because all the European companies came to India, merely they had a huge attraction. They had a understanding of the past about the prosperity of India. So they had a huge attraction. So primarily they don't have the motive that they should come and they should exploit India and thereby transforming into political power. I preferably would like to say that East India Company did not came to India with the objective of becoming political power, but it was circumstances in India persuaded company to aspire for the political power. This is the utmost thing that we can draw a concluding point. England, country less than size of Haryana, was ruling over 2/3 part of the globe, and out of that context you can say India was most important turned out to be for them. It was basically because this land was very prosperous. We can see, if you look at the timeline, 1600 AD this East India Company was formed. 8 years later this company came to India, established the first factory at Surat. And after that you can see this company had taken almost 150 years. 150 years this company remained as a political power. 150 years this company remained as a economic power, and 1757 this company transformed into political power. You might have studied in school the Battle of Plassey. This is the turning event which transformed this trading organization into political power. Fine. By definition, if political power was utilized in exploitation of economy of any country to benefit the mother country, you understand the mother country means England. So that phenomena is called colonialism. So therefore in 1757 Battle of Plassey, India transformed into classic British colony, and thereby 100 years this East India Company transformed almost 60% of India into British India. You will say that this 100 years of the company's rule in India, 60% of India had turned into British India. 60% Raja, Nawab and Jamindars, they transformed as a part of the British India. Fine. But I'm just looking at your school days information to collect and to create the entire timeline. And you might be knowing that there was a revolt in 1857. It was a huge revolt. Revolt of 1857. It was a huge revolt. And this revolt shook the backbone of company's rule in India. And in 100 years, India became necessity of the British rule. So, British government could not afford to lose India at any cost. So therefore, it also exposed that the company's governing mechanism in India is very hollow. Company is basically not efficient enough to rule India for the long time. And this is the reason why 1857 company was removed from administrative responsibility, and then till 1947 it was British Parliament which ruled India. The ruling guard was changed from East India Company ruling system to British Parliament. Okay, so you can see from 1757 to 1947, this is called colonial period. Colonial period. Actually, this period was responsible for transforming golden bird into bird. Whatever the policy designed by East India Company and whatever the policy designed by British Parliament thereafter, it only and only meant to reverse the balance of trade. And how beautifully they managed from an exporter of the consumer goods to become the large importer of consumer goods. India turned out to be a beautiful market for the British Industrial Revolution. Overall, you can see the transformation was so subjective that poverty of India was ultimately transforming into prosperity of England. The beauty of the London was basically on the bones and bloods of the cotton weavers of Deccan. Recently, you can see, although there are lots of books, but we have seen a book recently launched by Shashi Tharoor in Era of Darkness. Lots of factual information that he gave in order to prove that how beautifully British was managing India to build the prosperity of London. You can see, if you got the time to read that book, it's a very beautiful book. Other than lots of books are available for your course curriculum also, which is a very important for the examination point of view. See, now these days in examination, they are not asking anything, any particular event, cause, consequences, and other related facts. This is the time of something very different. And they are asking decades. Sometimes they ask a very length and breadth is like 100 years of the period was reflected in one sentence to frame the question. Suppose, if I will give you one example, that if there will be a question like this, tools and mechanism used by British to exercise control over India, similar tools and mechanism used by Indians to overthrow British rule from India. If this is a quotation, this is a quoted sentence, how you will analyze this? Can you understand? That means what? The 1757 to 1947, every tools and mechanism used by British to exercise control over India, similar tools and mechanism used by Indians to overthrow British rule from India. No doubt in this. The context of nationalism that had evolved, it is the beauty of the thing that some inner consciousness generated, and thereafter subjective exploitative mechanism understood by Indians both collectively led to the rise of nationalism. This is the fundamental fact you have to understand. So everything that we learn from 1757 to 1947 as a part of the colonial instrument, which basically meant to exercise control and exploitation of India, this part of the colonial experiment ultimately also generated a wave of nationalism in India, and then ultimately 1947 the national movement reached to its climax. Look at, I would like to give you one more beautiful thing to understand. What actually I am trying to make you feel like that, the some technical ways of learning the thing will make a difficult task very easy. So this is reason why let us have a glimpse of this graph again. Look at. I'm starting from revolt of 1857 itself. After 1857, we have just seen that British Parliament had taken control over India. Okay, fine, that's good. Because intensity of the revolt was so high. And of course, the East India Company lost its control over India at many places. Company was about to pack up. British government could not afford to lose India at any cost, because in 100 years India became necessity of England. So therefore, when British Parliament had taken control over India, what was the policy of British Parliament? This policy is called policy of consolidation. In fact, British was trying to consolidate its position in India, which became disturbed because of the revolt of 1857. Fine. So after 1857, British policy was policy of consolidation. Many fundamental changes was introduced. It was basically a structural change. We can see politico-administrative unification of India had started immediately after that. So every tools and mechanism that was used by British to go for politico-administrative unification of India, uniform general administration, uniform revenue administration, uniform judicial administration, and at the same time CRPC, IPC, this codification of law was so important. Pan-India, there should be uniformity of law. This is a what base thing British did. Otherwise, you can understand in independent India, even by you can go day by day, law making system in India is very difficult, because in the cultural perspective, in the social acceptance, if law is acceptable to some society, for some society it is actually repelled, it is actually retaliated. So pan-India making law. Anyway, the policy of consolidation was launched by British meticulously. That is referred as politico-administrative unification of India. But at the same time, it had resulted in the form of nationalism. How much consolidation was made by British, how much tools was imposed to strengthen the colonial control, that much intensely the concept of nationalism had evolved. Concept of nationalism had evolved. That much. So therefore, we can see that common Indians, those were comfortable in identifying themselves as Punjabi, Bengali, Gujarati, Tamil, Telugu, Marathis, now they started switching over to call themselves as an Indian. That is the shift in the thought process. Otherwise, the regional identity was more important than national identity among the Indians. And now 1857 onward, I told you that 1857 onward, nationalism had got the momentum. Then we see 1885, Indian National Congress came into existence. Indian National Congress came into existence. 1885. After establishment of Indian National Congress, why it was established, who established, this is a different thing that we'll study. But after establishment of Indian National Congress, this nationalism got a very fantastic political platform. And therefore, this political platform, it led to the rise of Indian national movement. Indian national movement. So immediately after, the consciousness of nationalism got a very fundamental political platform which is called Indian National Congress. And therefore, the nationalism had transformed into Indian national movement. And overall, then entry of Wonder Boy of India. That time you can see he came as a youth icon. He was Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, 1915. Advent of Gandhi, 9th January 1915. You can see every year we celebrate NRI Day. Advent of Gandhi. So 9th January 1915, Gandhi came after 20 years of the long experience in South Africa. All the methods of the Gandhian technique of mass mobilization was fully experimented there. So Gandhi came to India as a perfectionist. And therefore, advent of Gandhi had transformed this Indian national movement into mass movement. Mass movement. This is a magic of Gandhi. We will see that by using the various methods and technique, how Gandhi transformed this Indian national movement into mass movement. Okay. And then you can see the British also responded. When Indian national movement is started, British went for the policy of divide and rule. Divide and rule policy. And British had a first interaction with the Gandhian mass movement. It was the non-cooperation movement, you must be knowing. 1920 it had started, non-cooperation movement. And first time the Britishers, their policymakers got in touch with the mass sentiments of India. And the first interaction with the mass sentiments put Britishers on check. And then you can see that Britishers, corresponding to the mass movement of Gandhi, and the Gandhi was in very good position to bargain with the Britishers because of the rising mass strength. And Gandhian mass base forced Britishers to look for the policy called policy of compromise. This is what the policy, this is called policy of compromise. How much mass movement was gaining momentum, that much policy was built up to go for policy of compromise. And then you can see in 1947, if you look at the 1947, mass nationalism suits to independence. And policy of compromise forced British to leave, and this is how you can see that British had to leave India. And this entire graphical presentation will let you know that how in 90 years of the British rule from 1857 to 1947, how much we have to see the perspective of holistic information. So you can see policy of consolidation led to the rise of nationalism. Right? When Indian national movement had started, British adopted the policy called policy of divide and rule. Right? And when the mass movement had started, it forced British to go for compromise. This presentation, it is called war of position. War of position. Not position of war. War of position between rising nationalism and control mechanism. And this war of position actually became in favor of favor of Indians after 1920. Before that, it was in favor of the British. Okay. And then once the war of position was caught by Indian nationalism, 1947, the result was before you. So, we can see the mass movement of Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. We will discuss this man in detail. I told you that he is an iconic personality, the true philosopher born in Asia. And he has an inbuilt character to be a leader. His firmness, rigidity on any issues, uncompromising attitude. He just stick to the truth. And he was very good in psychological understanding. And at the same time, he was a very fantastic orator. These are the inbuilt things that made Gandhi undisputed mass leader in India. And at the same time, you can see the Gandhian strategy was always directed towards the generating the mass consciousness against the British based on the formula that he adopted called mass contact program. And at the same time, his technique of satyagraha and civil disobedience movement all had worked beautifully. Let's have a glimpse of the Gandhi. Then you will understand that how beautifully he managed the masses. See, 1915, Gandhi came to India after 20 years of the long struggle in South Africa. Then he was actually trying to be cooperator with the British, loyal to the British. Gandhi had a good understanding in the initial days of his politics that if you help British, British will help you. So this formula also made British so much to admire and to think about Gandhi. Gandhi got the title of Kasra-e-Hind, the way that he cooperated in South Africa during the Boers War, the way that Gandhi supported Britain in First World War by recruiting many Indians in the British Army. So Kasra-e-Hind. But 1919, some of the events, like we have Rowlatt Act, we have Jallianwala Bagh incident. So some of the events, the attitude of the British forced Gandhi to transform himself from cooperator to non-cooperator and from loyalist to opponent. This is the turning year in the history of Gandhi's relation with India. What I said, cooperator to non-cooperator and loyalist to opponent. No doubt in this, Gandhi created nationalist India. Gandhi made us think that India is something different from Britain. Otherwise, we were not coming out from the shadow of the British crown. That is Queen Victoria. Within the framework of Queen Victoria, there is India. But Gandhi made us realize that India is a nation something different from Britain. And that is the reason why I told you that Gandhi had created nationalist India. Then you move above. When he launched the first mass movement in 1920, then second mass movement in 1930, and then third mass movement in 1942. You might be knowing non-cooperation movement, civil disobedience movement, and Quit India movement. This movement of the Gandhi to be assessed in the perspective which is called STS model. STS model. Struggle, truce, struggle model. Means in between the two movements, he always take the rest to mobilize the masses to increase the strength of Indian nationalism. And we can see how much strength of Indian nationalism increased, that much intensity of the movement also increased. Earlier, Gandhi said that we will not cooperate. Then, when the masses' strength increased, he said disobedience. Another move. When the masses got increased so much, he said quit India. This is the way. This is the way that Gandhi was actually trying to cultivate the entire streams of Indian national movement. So, my dear students, what I am trying to convey you, that there are many models by which you can take the difficult target into a very easy streams. This is how technically you can arrange the syllabus. This is how the best part of any coaching, that things that you'll study in 4-5 months, within 30-40 hours, we can make you understand that how beautifully you can manage the entire syllabus. See, in the prelims format or in the mains format, now these days, you should not differentiate between these two until unless it is the last time to revise. So what I am suggesting you, try to read some standard text. Don't go by the guides and the notebooks available in the market. Many students, they preferably read magazine. Magazine is a supplement. If you study magazine, you have to remember the facts and figures, which is actually thing of the time of the revision. But when you read the newspaper consistently, you must have a sequential event of the things in your mind. So therefore, both are suffixed to each other. You cannot rely only on one. This model you have to maintain in your study curriculum. Secondly, many students, they prepare so many books, so many notes from the different books of the same subject. Suppose in history you read 4-5 books, you will make different notes. There is a one class note, there is some NCERT notes, there is some base book notes. Don't do that. There should be only one note, that is the class note. In this class note only, you put on figuring all the things that you read in the supplementary materials. Whatever you find important in that book, you must note in the same class note. The class note should be so much of the spaces, so that at the time of revision, you don't have to open so many books. Only one note, and thereby your revision will be intensively on target. And there is a plenty of chances that you will retain the facts and figures as per your arrangement. And this is totally indigenous ways of preparation. That is what is called self-study. So, whenever you completed your coaching, whatever the notes you have prepared in the classroom, this is your base thing to revise. Then, if you have got some important supplementary material suggested, read it and note down some of the things that you got from there in the same note itself. And thereby, this final note will make you qualify. So, don't scatter your thoughts in creating so many things. The formula is very straight. Formula is that it is better to read single book 10 times instead of reading 10 books single times. In the beginning itself, I told you, if there is an interest, you can explore the depth of the subject, and thereby it will make the toughest task easier for you. So this formula you have to take in record. This year in mains, there was a question that is what is called philosophy of art in the mains question paper. Trend was that in the 6 question probably had asked in the mains question paper, 2 was from modern India and 4 question was from art and culture comprising ancient and medieval. Enough. Even 10 marks, 15 marks will make a huge difference between those who will do, those who will not. So therefore, meticulous think. Don't leave question paper in mains. You have to write. You have a comprehensive information. So there is no point that you will not able to touch the question paper in mains. So when you leave the question, you will get 0. When you write something, you will get something. And that will add in your final tally. So there's a question, philosophy of art. The many people read the question twice. And if you understand the theme of the question, then half work done for the answering. So many people, they understood the two words, philosophy and art, and then rewriting some point of philosophy, some point of the art. And there's no and, this is of art, right? And then you can see, you one hand you see the artistic expression and the philosophy that is supporting that expression. So suppose there's a point called Saundarya Shastra. Oh, and you can relate this philosophical expression into the sculpture of the beauty of the Harappan's dancing girl. Then we have the Natya Shastra, another philosophical expression, entire music and dance that had turned out to be, whether it is a classical and the folk, that is based on that book. Or moreover, one of the best expression that you can answer this question by exemplification, it is what is called a statue of Nataraj. If you figure out the Nataraj, you can see in one hand Shiva is holding the drum. What is this? Drum is a sound of creation. And on the other hand, Shiva is holding the goblets of fire. So fire is a symbolism of destruction. So that means those who are created are bound to destroy. Then the hands that is pointing like this is expression of the fearlessness. The snake, that is the thing which is called in a dormant space in the spine. If it got aroused, then you can attain the super consciousness. In the circle, which is a cosmos, there is a nimbus of light, and that nimbus is actually the time, unending cycle of the time, Mahakal. Dwarf, Shiva is looking at dwarf, which is called ego, is very small, and combination of the male and female in the same figure, that is Ardhanarishwar. So this type of expression was beautifully carved out in that sculpture, which is called philosophy of art. So that way we can explain the answer. Otherwise, that is the reason why I told you that until unless you understand the theme of the question, it's difficult to write the correct answer. Many people will say, if have written, I did not get. This is the lag that you take in the time of examination. So it's a very great talking to you people, and I've tried my best to make you understand that how easy preparation could be if you understand the technique of preparation as well. And here lies the importance of any coaching institute, from you take the help. So hopefully it would have worked you, and we keep on talking to you in the more expressive format of the class. So thank you so much. Have a great day.